We're going to do Esther 5. Alright, so last week we saw Esther's defining moment, really, the kind of mantra that we hear a lot, we know a lot about Esther. And after learning about the deadly decree against her people, she calls for this 3-day fast of fasting and prayer. And by the end of the chapter, she declared, I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. She's finally come to the realization that her life is not in her hands, and she's not going to have any control over it, but this is the least that she can do. So today we're going to see what happens when the 3 days are up. And it's probably the longest 3 days of her life of waiting to see what was going to happen. Okay, so let's start Esther 5, verses 1 through 5. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance of the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. And he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even to half of my kingdom. And Esther said, If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king. Then the king said, Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. Now, I love this about Esther because she's been fasting for 3 days, and she decides now it's time to party. Okay, now it's time to throw a feast. All right, so she gets ready. But this is no ordinary outfit that she puts on. She puts on her royal robes, okay? She gets all dolled up. She's fancy, okay? Her makeup is perfect. Her hair is perfect. Her clothes just shout that she is the queen of Persia, okay? Now remember, Persia, the vast empire that has how many provinces? 127. Yes, 127 provinces stretching all across the world. She is the queen. And she's going to remind the king who she is. Because remember, the king's been a little distracted, okay? He's been entertaining other women, but when he sees her, he's reminded of who she is, okay? This is not just any woman. This is not just a pretty face. This is his queen, okay? Still, he hasn't seen her in a month, and he's been very distracted, okay? So she was just one of hundreds of women in the harem, all right? In this world, women were rarely seen as individuals, but she was going to make sure this king remembered who she was, okay? So she goes inside the court, probably trembling, okay? Just absolutely fearful of what's getting ready to happen because she has to walk past the guys with the axes, remember? Okay? She's got to make it past them, and at any moment, doesn't matter if she's the queen or not, they could take her head. But she enters in, and when the king sees her across the room, he goes, That's my queen. And he holds out his golden scepter to her. And then she has to cross the courtroom and touch it as a form of acceptance, okay, that she means him no harm. And at that moment, he is saying, You're safe, okay? I can listen to what you have to say. It is an incredible moment for her. You're welcomed into my presence. You're safe, and I'm ready to hear you. Okay? So that one tiny little gesture means everything and speaks volumes to her. Okay? So she reaches out and she touches the tip of it, and I'm sure just a moment of relief that this is not the moment I'm going to die, but that doesn't mean that, what I have to say isn't going to be accepted. Okay? So the king tells her, It seems like you have a request. Tell me what it is and I'll grant it. Okay, so we at least see she still has some favor with him. And this gesture that he says, even up to half of my kingdom, he's not going to give her half of his kingdom. It means, with anything within reason, I'll give you. Just ask and it will be done. Okay? And we also hear these words later in Scripture in a different context. Does anyone remember where a king tells someone, I will give you whatever you request up to half of my kingdom? Remember John the Baptist?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. and the king's daughter, he asked for the head of John the Baptist. Yeah, he says the same words. I'll give you whatever you want up to half of my kingdom. Okay? So Esther does not make a dramatic plea. She doesn't ask for anyone's heads to roll, but she invites the king and Haman to a feast. Just the two of them. So this is in contrast to the first feast that we saw at the very beginning. Everyone was invited, and it was so huge we had to have 2 different parties going on. And yet she says, I want to have a feast, and you are invited, and Haman. And that's it. Just the two of you. Come to my feast. Okay? I'm sure after 3 days of fasting, she's ready to feast, but she probably is using this very wise choice. She knows her husband. She's been with him now for 5 to 6 years. She knows that food and atmosphere.
So by chapter 5 or 6 years have passed?
She's been on the throne. We've actually now
I know, I gotta go back and watch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's been on the throne for about 5 years. Yes. So she knows her king. She knows that food and atmosphere are ways to get to his heart and his ear. Okay, so she is building up this moment. She knows that the king is very emotional, very emotion driven. He can be easily swayed. So this is one way to butter him up. Okay, come to a feast, just me and you and Haman, and we're gonna have a conversation. Okay, so the king agrees very quickly. He said, yeah, somebody go get Haman. We're gonna go right now to this feast. Okay, this is the feast ready to go. So I want to know, have you ever had to prepare for a difficult conversation? And what have you done to prepare for that difficult conversation that you had to have with somebody? Huh?
I said probably.
Probably didn't fast for 3 days.
Right.
Yeah. So we can do all kinds of things to prepare for these really hard conversations, and most of us don't think to pray and to ask God for wisdom and preparation and things like that. So we have to be careful about that. Well, let's find out what happens in verse 6. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther answered, my wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. Okay, so this is very interesting. So they have a feast, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and then as custom for the Persians, they would then have their dessert, which was more wine, okay? They would have wine during the feast, but then they would have wine, and this would be an opportunity to talk and to enjoy each other and things like that. So the king is very fat and happy and full of wine, and he says again to Esther, Esther, you've done all of this. You've prepared this incredible feast for us. What is it that you want? I'm more than happy to give you anything that you want. Tell me, and it will be fulfilled, okay? This man is ready to practically give her anything that she can request. And yet when Esther opens her mouth, the moment she's been waiting for, the moment she's been preparing for all of this time, instead of saying what she really wants, she says, I want you to come tomorrow for another feast and bring Haman. And that's it. That's all the king gets. So they're invited to the second feast, and we don't know exactly why she pauses. Maybe she sensed that the king wasn't quite ready to hear what he had to say. Maybe fear crept in. Maybe she started to wonder, is this really going to work? Is he really going to understand? And maybe, with Haman sitting right there, maybe she's getting the king to question, why is she just inviting me and Haman here? Is there something going on with her and Haman? Is there a plot afoot? So maybe all of these different things are in play, maybe for some other reason, but she chooses to delay her request. Okay? And we see her wisdom at work here. What do you think is going through her mind at this moment? She's got the king right where she wants him. He's ready to do anything for her. And yet she says, it's not the right time. I have to prepare another feast tomorrow. And I'll ask tomorrow. It's very interesting. I wonder what was going through her mind at that moment. I wonder sometimes maybe if we should have that moment of pause
More often than not, probably.
Before we say something,
Yeah.
before we ask something, to pause and to say, maybe now's not the right time. Okay, so we see a lot of wisdom on her. We see a lot of God's providence on her, of timing being an important role in this story. Okay? Alright, so let's find out what happens. So
Haman still at this time has no idea that Esther's Jewish and what that would do to the king if under his proclamation they're all supposed to be killed.
right.
Is the king going to be like, oh wait a minute, hold on?
Yeah, Haman's just living it up. He's living his best life. He's second in command. It's only him and the king at this feast, and now he gets the invitation again tomorrow. He's on cloud nine. He's having a great time. All right, so we find out what happens to Haman when he leaves the party. And Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. And when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and brought his friends and his wife, Zeresh, and Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above all the officials and the servants of the king. And then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all of this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Okay, so we're gonna pause right there. So Haman leaves this feast. He's fat, he's happy, he's full of wine. He's been blessed by being in the presence of the king and queen of this entire empire. And he makes it to the gate and no further, because there he sees Mordecai sitting at the gate. And while everyone else skips up and bows down and trembles before Haman, Mordecai just sits there, not willing to move, not willing to bow, not even willing to rise in honor of his presence. And that just has Haman undone. He is full of wrath. I can't believe this guy. And he steals all of his joy. All of this. This Jew doesn't even fear me, doesn't even respect me, doesn't even flinch at my presence, doesn't show me any sign of respect. Okay? That one act completely undoes all of his joy and all of his splendor. But he doesn't again say, guards, this man doesn't rise before me. He's in violation of the king's order. Kill him. No, he takes all of that wrath and stores it up and takes it home and calls all of his friends and his wife, and he throws a little mini pity party, and he says, I've got all of these promotions and all of this splendor, and look at my house and look at all of our kids, and yet it means nothing to me. All the things that I've worked for, all the things that I have been blessed with, it means nothing to me because this one guy won't bow down before me. Wow. Really? He's boasting in all of these things that he's been given. He's being truthful and saying, I've been given all of these things. And yet, none of it has satisfied. Because the one thing that I want is for that one little Jew to bow down. And he refuses. Because he can't have that one thing. Nothing else will satisfy him until Mordecai bows down to him. Okay? But Haman's problem isn't really Mordecai. It's this gaping hole inside of him that he's been trying to fill with all that other stuff. With the birth of his sons, and with all of his promotions, and with all of his friends, and with all of his fill in the blank. And nothing is satisfying him. And that gaping emptiness he thinks is going to be fulfilled if he gets the last person in the kingdom to bow down to him. But even if he got that, it wouldn't be fulfilled. Okay? So he's trying to fill that void with status and with riches and with applause, and none of it's working. and his pride turns into poison. Okay? So why do you think this one act of disrespect outweighs all of Haman's success? One act of disrespect.
Because it's the one thing he can't have his way.
It's the one thing he can't control. It's the one little buffer on his idol that he can't get out because Mordecai won't bow down to him. Okay? So
If
let's.
he kills him, he's still not gonna bow down to him. So like,
Right. He would get his way.
I mean, he's dead, but
He would
still
then be a
never
martyr.
bow down to you.
Right. And that would be unfulfilled. So he stores up all of this wrath. And then let's find out what happens. Okay? So he's sitting there just stewing in all of this. Then his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast." This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
Oh my.
Oh my.
One of the
It's
darkest
just like your daughter
parts.
in that.
Yes. The darkest part of the story. Haman's own wife
Dun, dun, dun.
makes this suggestion. Build a 50 cubits. I know to us we're like, what is 50 cubits? What does that matter? Right?
5 feet tall.
75 feet tall
That's pretty tall.
spike driven into the ground. And we're gonna stick Mordecai on it. We're gonna pull him down until he suffers in agony and dies. Do you think this was a little excessive?
Gosh, dang, how barbaric.
Little excessive.
Little excessive. Do we really need 75 feet
No.
to hang a guy on?
How do you even get him up there?
That's what I was wondering. How are they gonna get him up there?
Yeah.
How are we gonna get him up there?
How are we
We're
gonna
gonna
get
have to
him?
build a
We're gonna
ladder.
have to build a ladder.
Ladder.
Pull it
Ladder.
down and again.
To get him up there. So is it really about killing him?
No.
What is this?
Humiliating him.
Humiliation.
Yeah,
Public
but you think having it
display.
lower at eye level would be better than everybody having to do this.
No,
Because like they want to see
Everybody
everywhere. That's
Oh, that's awesome. Far, far away.
Mordecai won't bow down, so we're going to raise him up. 75 feet, y'all. That's 7-story building tall. Yeah, he would have been able to see him for a while. And then his wife comes up with this idea. Okay? And Mordecai goes, "That's a great idea. Let's do it." And they build this overnight. Okay, overnight, they built a 75-foot stake in the ground, enough to kill a man. Okay? And he goes, "Yeah, that's great. Let's do that. I really like that suggestion. I know I married you for some reason."
It wasn't just
So
all
what
this
are they, a
stuff.
bunch of drunk men out there just building ladders and stakes and having a good
No,
old
he
time?
had all the, he had all the servants.
Yeah.
They watched.
They watched. Could you imagine? He's just sitting out there, you know,
With his wine.
with his wine. This is going to be awesome. Everyone's going to see Mordecai's body right there. He won't bow down. This is what's going to happen to him. It was a public display for Haman. This is what's going to fulfill me. If I put Mordecai right up there, that's going to do it.
Oh my. I cheated.
Oh,
I Don't read ahead.
Anyway.
I couldn't handle it. I'm like, are we gonna go further? I need to know.
Okay, so remember, this is a public execution that we have. It's about humiliation. They suggest build this, go to the king in the morning, ask him for Mordecai, put Mordecai on it, and then go to the feast. Enjoy yourself. Right? It sounds like a great plan. Okay? Go to the feast, then you'll be at peace. You'll know Mordecai's dead. Everyone else will see it. It's going to be great. Okay? So this method of execution was completely brutal. We've talked about this before. The Persians had this history of making gruesome examples of their enemies, and Mordecai is Haman is no exception here. There's actually an ancient story that tells of the Spartan king, if you've ever heard the story of the 300, same Spartan king, who led his 300 men against the Persian king. But after his death later on in battle, King Ahasuerus, this king that we're talking about, he takes the Spartan king, he beheads him, he takes the body and he impales it in the middle of the battlefield for everyone to see, because he wanted to disgrace him even in battle, even after battle, even in death, and then he keeps his head as a memento.
Oh.
It's the same king. No, it's the same king. Okay? So Haman here isn't just planning revenge. He doesn't just want Mordecai dead. He wants him utterly humiliated, the way that Haman has felt every time he has walked by and Mordecai has not bowed down. So he's going to humiliate him even in death. Okay? This is what wounded pride unchecked looks like. Okay? That you're willing to build a 75-foot stake in the ground to have somebody executed upon. Okay? This is the same kind of hatred that drove Jesus' enemies to nail him on a cross. The Persians are the ones that brought this to the Romans. The Romans perfected it. This then becomes the means of crucifixion. This is the foundation of crucifixion. Okay? So Haman is thrilled with this idea, and he has orders to build it that very night. Okay? So have you ever received some advice that maybe not so great for other people around you? Have you ever received advice that sounded really good? It sounded like, yes, I'm on board with that. But anybody else looking at it would go, I really should have rethought that. It doesn't really sound like that's such a great plan. And my favorite part is that this idea comes from his wife and his friends. It's not Haman's idea. He's just so filled with wrath. He just doesn't even know what to do. And their suggestion is, let's do this. That'll work. That'll fulfill me. Okay? So while Esther chooses patience and wisdom, Haman chooses pride and revenge. And in this story, we see a contrast between trusting God's time and letting emotions dictate your actions. And that is where we're going to leave today's story.